Well, hello, confirmands. It is good to talk to you. This is unbelievably our last lesson for the year. It's been a good year, and I've been really grateful for your questions and for your comments, for your disagreements, for your thoughtfulness. It has been an honor to be your teacher. So it's not going to be the longest lesson we have. I want to leave time for you to ask questions about anything that you've been sitting on for the whole of the year. But I want to leave you with some stories about Jesus' mastery over nature. That when we're talking about Jesus, we're talking about God. And that, as Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. You know, we talked earlier in the year about that this is one of the ways that Jesus shows us that he's God, that this is not something that you have to swallow your reason or your understanding of a scientific and orderly universe in order to accept, that it just makes sense that the person who created would have the opportunity to step in and out of the created order and to do things that other people can't do. And so Jesus is very like the person that writes a video game for the computer and knows the backdoor ways to make things happen. That doesn't mean that we think that all order has been suspended or that the universe isn't an orderly place, that the laws aren't reasonable and regular. It just means that Jesus is not one of us, that Jesus is God. I mean, he is one of us. That's the miracle, that it's God that takes on human flesh, but that Jesus is God and can do things that we can't imagine. So, 3 stories about Jesus, his mastery over the physical universe that will help us all remember who this is that we're talking about. Phrase that pays begins with these 5 words: a Christian is never in. A Christian is never in. All right? So the first story, Jesus calms a storm, from Mark 4. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Right, so this is a story where Jesus speaks words and calms the storm. You know, where it says that he rebukes the wind, it's the same word in Greek that he uses when he casts out demons. That Jesus has authority over powers that for you and I, you know, are unassailable, that we can't possibly touch. That he can tell the wind and the sea to be still. So it's a picture of Jesus in his power, in his glory. You might want to talk about this, you know, that he's asleep in the midst of this, that the disciples are panicking. This question they asked, "Don't you care that we're perishing?" You know, they were in the safest place in the whole universe. They were with Jesus. Nothing's going to happen to them while they're with him. But there's lots to think about here, and there's lots to see when we talk about Jesus and his power. Now, the next 4 words of the phrase that pays: a state of completion. A state of completion. Next story, from Mark 6, starting at verse 34. Jesus feeds the multitude. As he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. When it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now very late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy something for themselves to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves have you? Go and see." When they had found out, they said, 5, and 2 fish. Then he ordered them to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat in groups of hundreds and of 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven. He blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of fish. Those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. So again, it's a story that talks about Jesus' compassion. I love that line that he saw them as sheep without a shepherd. And about Jesus' power, that he can multiply whatever is available in order to bless and fill every need. There are some people who want to turn this story into a sort of a stone soup story. Remember that story that your folks read you when you were little? You know, that everyone had food hidden away, and then when they're doing the stone soup, when the soldiers come, they all put in something, and voila, they all have food. That's not what we're talking about here. That this is about Jesus miraculously multiplying food, and that there's 12 baskets left over. Again, 12 is a special number, right? It has the 12 tribes of Israel. That not only is there enough for all, that there is excess for all of God's people. So it's a big story, and I hope that you'll have good questions about it. Next 4 words in the phrase that pays: but always in a. But always in a. All right? And our last little story. Remember, it's a shorter lesson this time because I want to leave lots of time for you to think of questions that have been bothering you all year. Jesus walks on water. So this is immediately following the story that we just read, the story of the feeding of the multitude. Immediately, he made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. After saying farewell to them, he went up onto the mountain to pray. When evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on the land. When he saw that they were straining at the oars against an adverse wind, he came towards them early in the morning, walking on the sea. He intended to pass them by, but when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out, for they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased, and they were utterly astounded, for they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. My guess is you're going to have questions there, right? But again, I want you to see Jesus in his compassion and in his power, that he sees them struggling, and so he walks to them. He walks across the water. Not on the land around the lake, right? He's not waiting. He's walking on the water. And then when he reaches them, they think the only rational thing. They know people can't walk on water, right? These are fishermen, many of them, right? They think he's a ghost. They think he's a spirit. But he tells them that he is not, that it is he himself. He gets into the boat, and again, the wind ceases. It's an extraordinary story about Jesus' power. It's an extraordinary story about Jesus' ability to calm us when he joins us during the turbulent times of our life. And then there's this weird part at the end, that if they'd understood about the loaves, if they'd understood about the power of God, they would not have been flummoxed when he walks on water. But somehow their hearts have been hardened. There's plenty there for us to talk about too. Last part of the phrase that pays: process of becoming. Process of becoming. Put an exclamation point on the end of that. It's a Martin Luther quote. That's how we should end. And I, again, am looking forward to seeing you on the 10th. I, again, am grateful for this past year. You take care. Bye-bye.